Hey guys, Josh here in my man cave slash studio, and I want to talk to you a little bit today about flipping things around. Speaking of flipping things around, do you guys remember this game? I guess it was popular a year or two ago, where you take a bottle and you fill it with like a quarter full of fluid or liquid, and you flip it up like that, and you try to get it to land on its base. I never was very good at that, but I thought it was cool to maybe try that today. If you haven't tried that, maybe try it at home. All you do is fill it to about right there and then just flip it down. That did not work. Just keep flipping it till it stays. I'm going to tell you it stayed. It really didn't. But anyway, flipping things around. And I also want to talk to you about humility today. And if you don't know, humility is putting others first by giving up what you think you deserve. And having humility or being humble is kind of an upside down way to live. It's a lot more common to put yourself first, but Jesus came and flipped that whole notion on its head, flipped it right around. He showed what it looks like to put others first. He came to serve, not to be served. So starting today, we're looking at the events that led up to the greatest example of humility, and that's when Jesus gave his life for us on the cross. So Passover was coming soon, and we've talked about Passover before in Epic Kids. It was a holiday when everyone remembered how long ago God had rescued his people from slavery in Egypt. And on the Sunday before the great feast and celebration, Jesus enters Jerusalem. And crowds of people were there to cheer for him, to cheer him on. But there was another person moving among a different kind of crowd and plotting a sneaky plan. And it was Judas, one of Jesus' closest followers. He was going behind Jesus' back, and he was meeting with the religious leaders. And Jesus knew all about Judas' plan and his plan to betray him. But he also knew that he had to go through with everything that was coming, no matter how difficult it would be. He knew he had to face it head on without defending himself. He chose the way of humility, and he gathered his closest friends around together so they could celebrate the Passover meal together one last time. So Jesus ate with his friends, and I imagine it was a good time had by all but Jesus, that is. You see, Jesus knew that the next few days would be very difficult for his friends and for himself. So he wanted to prepare his friends for what would happen next. After he shared the Passover meal with them, he led them on a walk out of the city. And Jesus told them, "In a little while you will no longer see me. Then after a little while you will see me. I came from the Father and entered the world. Now I'm leaving and going back to the Father." The disciples must have looked around and were like, "What?" They loved this man named Jesus, and they didn't want to see him go. All except one, and he's the one I mentioned before, Judas, who had already left by then to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Jesus led the disciples to the Mount of Olives, and along the way, Jesus' friends pledged their love and their loyalty, but Jesus knew what was about to happen. When they reached the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus asked the disciples to stay while he went off to pray. So as all the disciples found a spot to sit and rest, Jesus asked that Peter, James, and John come along with him just a bit farther down the path into the garden. And there, near a small grove of really old olive trees, Jesus spoke again. His voice was heavy with grief. He said, "My soul is very sad. I feel close to death. Stay here. Keep watch with me." Then Jesus went a little farther to pray. Peter, James, and John meant to stay up and keep watch like Jesus had asked them to, but that was a little difficult. So while Jesus' three friends tried to stay awake, Jesus prayed. He said, "My Father, if it's possible, take this cup of suffering away from me, but let what you want be done, not what I want." Jesus returned to where he had left his three friends, and it seemed that instead of waiting and keeping watch, Peter, James, and John all fell asleep. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" Jesus asked. He asked the men again if they would stay awake and pray while he went to pray for a second time. "My Father, is it possible for this cup to be taken away? But if I must drink it, may what you want be done. Again, Jesus returned to his friends. And again, they were sound asleep. Jesus went back to pray for a third time. And again, he asked God if there was any other way. But at the same time, he trusted God's plan. Jesus returned to the sleeping disciples and woke them. And he knew the time had come. A large crowd had arrived, sent by the chief priests and elders. And Judas was with them. And Jesus said, the Son of Man is about to be handed over to sinners. Get up, let's go. Here comes the one who is handing me over to them. Judas had told the mob he would identify the man to be arrested with a simple kiss on the cheek. And he went straight over to Jesus and he kissed him on the cheek. And Jesus looked at Judas and said, friend, do what you came to do. The mob surged forward to grab Jesus and arrest him. Peter swung his sword and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant. But Jesus told Peter, stop. He knew that he had to be arrested. It had to happen this way. He reached out and he healed the servant's ear and made it better. And Jesus spoke to the crowd after that. Am I leading a band of armed men against you? Do you have to come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courtyard teaching, and you didn't arrest me. But all this has happened so that the words of the prophets would come true. The people arrested Jesus and took him away. And Jesus' friends, the ones who promised to stay with him through everything, they ran away, they scattered. Jesus had chosen a path of humility that would bring life for everyone, but one that would cost him everything. When he was praying in the garden, he prayed to God and asked for this whole thing to be passed, to be skipped. He asked if it could all go away. But in the end, Jesus gave up what he wanted for the sake of God's bigger plan. He chose to put us first when he allowed himself to be arrested, and eventually when he died on the cross to take our punishment for our sins. Jesus gave us the ultimate example of humility. He put us first, and you and I can choose to follow his example today by flipping it around. And that means putting someone else's needs above your own. It means giving someone else what they want, not demanding that you get what you want. It's not easy, but with God's help, we can choose to put others first. Thank you, guys. Till next time.